Hello, my name is Una Reedy. I'm a reporter with Mining Journal, and welcome to this Future of Mining 365 exclusive with Barbara Dischinger, Director of International Women in Mining, and Alex Atkins, who is also a Director at International Women in Mining. Welcome, both of you.
Hello, Una.
Hi, how are you? Thanks for joining us, guys, on this very interesting topic, which is very close to my heart, and as it is to both of yours, I'm sure. So Alex, I will start with you just to open the conversation. Why is there so few women in senior management and executive roles in the mining sector? I know I've spoken to you about this before, so I know that you have some good insights, but if you could talk to me about this, that'd be great, and give your insights into why this is so.
So I'll start off by just letting you know that I'm from the mining industry, and I've been in it my whole life. So I'm 53 now, and my theories are based on observation. It's anecdotal and empirical evidence. I don't have data. We need data. We'll talk about this later. But so my theories are that actual mining women, who are often called STEM women because they're mining engineers, geologists, geotechnical engineers, metallurgists, and those are the other kinds of engineers and scientists. When they have their children, they're often kind of displaced or marginalised from their own sector because they can't work like a man, long hours, lots of travel, because a lot of our work is, operational. And if they leave working for mining companies and going to consulting so that they get the flexibility, they then disappear off the radar of potential leadership material. They are no longer captured in all of the initiatives for women in mining because they're all run by mining companies for the women that work for them. So consultants are missing from that radar. So that's one area. And another area, I think that there is increasingly greater representation of functional women, such as lawyers and accountants, HR and communications professionals in the leadership because they're visible, and also because they can sector switch between many sectors as they, over their careers, develop commercial acumen to be seen to have the merit they need to make it into the leadership, the C-suite of mining companies and VP levels of mining companies. So in mining generally what we are seeing is an overrepresentation of functional professionals and an underrepresentation of mining's deep domain experts who are women in leadership. And if we're going to attract young ladies into STEM, mining deep domain professions, we really do need to fix that problem of retention and development.
Sure. And this is a problem that lies across the mining sector as a whole. I mean, the juniors and the tier one miners. I mean, obviously, I saw some figures recently from some of the ASX companies, and the likes of Rio Tinto, FMG, and South 32 do have 30%, over 30% female directors. So, I mean, they do seem to be making some good progress there. And I guess obviously for juniors, it can be a bit different. But can you talk to me a bit about that, about whether there is a difference between the two, or, I mean, whether,
Well, first of all, there's a big difference between boards and executives. And a lot of progress has been made with better representation of females on boards. None of these numbers that we've been getting reported to us reflect the issue that I've raised with you, which is about functional versus STEM deep domain mining women. That data is not collected. So I can't, with evidence, claim that argument. I can only give it to you anecdotally. But it's true. And there are no initiatives to sort that problem out at the moment. I'm hoping that it won't be long and there'll be some really serious style shifting initiatives that IWIM hopefully will drive. And yes, there is a little bit of a difference between, say, in Australia, we've got the ASX 200 and above. So those companies are better, have better representation of women in their leadership. And then if you're not ASX 200, if you're a smaller company than that, then it gets progressively worse the smaller your company is. And that's got a lot to do with networks in the industry, and the people who, you know, form a small company often form a small company with people they know and trust, because it's a risky thing to do. And it just highlights the fact that their networks are very limited to people that are like them, you know, people they went to school with, people they play footy with. So that's very limited, and unfortunately it doesn't tap into the talent of a lot of women who actually are underutilized in our sector, particularly once they have children. So lots of underutilized, amazing STEM women in our industry, completely untapped, that would add a lot of value to all companies through the entire range. And I think the same applies in Canada and in the UK. I've seen data from all over the world, and it seems to represent a systemic pattern that's it's not changed. It's the same everywhere, I think. Is that right, Barbara?
Yes, I think that is quite the same really everywhere. There are a few places where regulation, like in South Africa, sort of drives the numbers up. And, you know, there is a case for positive action. And there is a big debate, obviously, whether that is a good thing or not. I think the sentiment in Canada and in other regions is that positive action is welcome, whereas I think in Australia there's a very, very strong sort of feeling that women have that it should be on merit. So unfortunately on that one we all have a long way to go, because I'm not sure if meritocracy really is a thing. In terms of the latest stats, so we have some recently from the UK, from the fifth report, the 2020 Hampton-Alexander report, has just been released not that long ago, which is done annually and shows the progress made against the FTSE 350, and goes quite deeply, not just on boards, but it really looks at executive leadership and committee representation, etc., and each year tries to go a bit deeper. So it's good to see that there have been an increase again in women in the boardroom, but not enough in leadership, and this is the same in the mining sector within that cohort. The overwhelming majority of the companies in the mining sector in the FTSE 350 have increased their women on boards or stayed the same. So that's really, really positive.
Yeah,
but numbers have decreased in senior executives positioned at 6 of the 13 mining companies. So that is actually really alarming, because that is almost half. And only 5 out of the 13 have over 25 or over female leadership. So that is obviously a more difficult nut to crack. And on boards, the average is of 28.7% in that cohort, with 6 companies having 30% or more women on their board. So just showing that the board is really sort of trending up and is the easiest one that companies seem to be able to sort of fix or get their heads round, but it doesn't always trickle down to the rest. Junior mining companies, I think it's the same everywhere. It is really about networks. I think we're starting to see a shift with more women on boards of junior mining companies, but that tends to be after IPO, when they're slightly more established. I think it's rare at the very beginning, and so something to really celebrate when it does happen.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So to move in the right direction, really, we will require, significant concerted action, I think. Otherwise, the status quo, very little will change. Because, for example, McKinsey does a women in the workplace survey. Obviously, it's across all sectors, but they have only seen, and they've been doing that since 2015, and they've only seen really modest sign of progress in the representation of women in the corporate pipeline. across all sectors. It's really, really minimal. It's like 1 or
Mm.
2% shift only across, you know, the whole sort of seniority level change. So I don't think there has been a massive shift. As Alex is saying, we really need a lot more data and a lot more granular data to really understand, because we're using obviously the data on boards, and that shows an increase, but that hides also a lot of the other things that are happening behind, and we don't know because we don't have any data. And
Yes.
you know, without data, nothing, you know, you can't progress, you can't do anything. It's really,
you can't influence.
Yeah,
You can't influence. You might know, but you can't prove it.
Yeah, so that does seem to be a major problem. The lack of disaggregated data on women and on, I guess, other minority groups. So how can mining companies tackle this? I mean, what can mining companies do to resolve this? So there is more data. And Alex, as you mentioned earlier, just before the recording, about how you know, we need solutions, not just a load of data to be looking at and to write reports about. That actually solutions are needed to get women more representation for females on, you know, across mining companies, across the mining sector. Overall.
So up until now, it's pretty clear if the dial's not shifted on representation in leadership. Clearly, what we've been doing so far has been potentially what you call optics or theatre. So a lot of lunches and breakfasts and photo opportunities, awards, which have no financial gain or no real sustainable difference to the woman's life who's won an award. So those things are lovely. They make everybody look great, but do they shift the dial? No, they don't. So to shift the dial, you actually have to make a difference to a woman's life, a woman in the industry. So I'm speaking from the point of view of women like me here, because I'm a mother and I'm a STEM woman from the mining industry. I've committed my whole life to the mining industry. And so there are no initiatives anywhere that I've seen that do what a lot of other initiatives do for lawyers and accountants and other, you know, the functional professions in our sector and in other sectors. Because they're in the corporates, they can, because they're in headquarters in cities with flexible work and a culture that accepts, you know, the needs of mothers. But when you're a STEM woman in the mining industry, where there's a lot of expectation to work like a man, the male model of work, lots of travel, long hours, then having that flexibility around your family or your parents, if your parents are elderly, it's very difficult to get that. Even in consulting, if you're client facing and you have to be responsive to clients' needs in real time, it's very difficult to do that with the flexibility you need for family. So we need to come up with some initiatives that help women to work the way they want to work, to give them agency and autonomy, to respect them and trust them, to deliver value in a way that works for them and their family. So I just think that if we can come up with some solutions around that, then we'll start to see probably quite a flow of women who are experienced, qualified. There's a lot of value in experienced and qualified people, particularly during a commodity boom or an upcycle, which we're currently experiencing. And there's a lot of rhetoric at the moment about a skills shortage. It's really frustrating to hear that rhetoric when I know there's a marginalised and underutilised cohort of very qualified and experienced, capable people who are not, you know, they're just in the margins, missing from the radar. So we need initiatives that pull them in under the spotlight. Let's find these women and then let's figure out where they're at and where do they want to be? Where do they want to go with their career? Who wants to be a leader? Who doesn't? And then let's help them to get the opportunities they need. And that's not going on courses and having a mentor, because they already have that and they're often self-funded too. they need opportunities to actually get the work experience and to be exposed to the leaders of the industry. So give them small projects to start with, build the trust up, and to believe in their merit, and slowly work your way up from there. These women need these kinds of opportunities.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, there are obviously women who really want to work in the mining sector, but obviously then there are some that don't, because there is that image, and obviously it's completely out of date, but the image of the man covered in suit down the coal mine. But the women in your membership and in your organization, they're obviously really keen to move up the ladder, but they're kind of hitting a glass ceiling, or they can't because of their family situation, or they need to go and pick their kids up at 6 p.m. And so they express their frustrations. I mean, are you meeting a lot of women who are frustrated with I guess, hitting that glass ceiling and not being able to progress further?
Yeah, so thanks to social media, we've got LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, email, phone calls, you've got WhatsApp, Skype, you name it. There's a lot of channels to the women out there to find out how they're going, and they do touch base with me regularly. And I'm struck by the consistency in the messages I'm receiving. And there's three key themes. One is, it's the glass ceiling, or it's kind of like career Siberia. You're stuck in the grinder level. You're just doing the same stuff over and over again and not getting exposed to things that help you learn and grow, and develop the commercial acumen to take risks, and dive in the deep end and do some difficult things that you've never done before. So those opportunities are really, really rare for women once they're mothers in the industry. Another one is values. A lot of them find that their personal values, as you get older, you start to understand more and more what your personal values are, what's important to you. And in your career, you start to see instances in the company you work for or in your industry generally where your values are not aligned with your company's values or your industry's values. And that creates a lot of stress for people. And it can lead to them wanting to leave the industry rather than stay and make it better, which is what we would prefer. So that's the two main ones. I think it's stuck in the grinder level, can't progress. You've got the values misalignment. And then there's a little bit of mental health stuff in there too. You've got those two things that I've already mentioned in the mix, and if you're in a job where there's a heck of a lot of, quite a patriarchal culture, which can over time eat away at your self-esteem and your confidence. It's actually not a healthy environment to be in. So all of these things add up. Women either leave and go and do teaching and nursing and other careers, law. It's quite common. I can't believe that they give up what they've done. What they've done is really amazing, and they should leverage off of it, and they're not. And the ones that do stay, you'll find are the ones who are probably just rebellious. I'm one of those. So you hang in there because the industry needs people like us to make it better. And by hanging in there and persevering, eventually your day will come. People know over time you've worked hard and you deserve a seat at the table.
Yeah, sure. And Barbara, if I can maybe bring it back to you, how does International Women in Mining advocate for things to change? What do you suggest the mining industry does to close this data gap that we have, which could help solve the problem of gender balance and diversity?
Thank you. Yeah, no, it is a global issue. And I think it's important first to understand the context, and that it happens, the lack of data is an issue both in large scale mining, but also in artisanal and small scale mining. So it really, and it's it's in all mining jurisdictions, be that in established ones or in emerging markets. So that this missing data issue is global. When we have figures, they're unreliable or not complete. And so we don't really have the full reality of women in mining and the intersectionality within the women and the issues remain mostly undisclosed and misunderstood due to the lack of data. So the avenues for improvement that we see are obviously that corporate disclosure needs to increase and improve by getting more data, not just across employees, but also contractors, consultants they use, suppliers, and include data across functions and professions as well, and across seniority levels. So much more granular data is needed, first of all. And companies need to measure and publish the results openly so that data is available for everyone to see. Either to use in research and even to get the conversation started around all of this and sort of globally as a sector to improve things. And even if the data shows that companies aren't doing well, it shows and gives an example to others to follow. With data, they can also more accurately assess where the pain points are and address it more effectively, much better than with assumptions and or groping in the dark. So data is also essential to track progress over time. This is done in all areas of the mine cycle or the mine itself, so you apply it in mine planning, the commercial team, across everything. So why not in this case, really? So, and also I would recommend to start small if need be, but to do it regularly and add metrics and indicators as soon as it is possible, including increasing the scope to contractors and suppliers. So every additional piece of data will help to get a clearer picture in the end. But it's not just, it's everybody else who also needs to measure data and come together. So we also recommend national or regional assessments across large-scale mining, supply chain, and ASM to compare and complete corporate disclosure. And then ideally what IWM would like to see is to aggregate and publish or analyze global data to integrate it into the analysis of mining social impact. The ESG frameworks that are there, they need to be used as well. They're not built for mining, but it's a good start. We need to also make sure that the right questions are asked. Include women as well in when you're building the surveys, when you're finding out, make sure that, test it out, make sure that that data, has any, make sense and will give you the missing bits of information that you actually need. So those would be our recommendations. I can I can talk about this for a long time, but I'll stop there.
Yeah, I guess I was just wondering, has there been any moves made in this direction to date by mining companies? Are you starting to see? You mentioned figures at the start of the conversation from the UK, but are there are miners starting to release more information and to kind of deep dive into these figures, or is there a long road ahead before this is actually going to be a reality?
There is a long road ahead, even if there is much more data now than there used to be. Stock exchanges measure in certain places or certain institutions, companies. There are now EITI standards sort of around gender, the World Council as well. There are more and more sort of standards in place, and there are more that will come as well. So I think there is definitely more reporting being done. There is starting to be more granular data, especially at major mining companies. Some are doing the transparency really, really well and divulging and doing that well, but I'm not sure that it's generally done across the whole company. but it's not zeroing in on the difference, for example, between corporate and mine sites, or specifically looking at the different functions and seniority levels. So there's still a lot that can be done in terms of looking at it at much deeper levels. Some companies are starting to also look at ethnicity and other intersectionality bits and pieces as well. So that's sort of newer, and there's a lot more work to be done there. So yes, we're definitely seeing an increase in reporting, which is all going in the right direction. But we need a lot more, and we need more voluntary disclosure, or people that don't have to do it to start doing it as well.
I mean, obviously it's for miners, it's a huge challenge with all this ESG reporting. So do you think it's almost too much to ask mining companies to release all this extra data that isn't required by reporting standards? Obviously,
no, they have to report on environment and everything else, and they have to do the reporting. I don't see why this should be any different. It is ESG, so this is part of governance, it's part of social. So, and it's part of good business. It's not just for for us, it's for them. I think it's important data for the company to check, test its own pulse, see how it's doing, where it needs to improve, and where its own issues are. I don't think it's, I think that's what mining companies need to understand as well. It shouldn't be a burden. It should be something that allows you to see how you're doing, and if there's been progress and what the impact has been.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and if I may just add a point, is that around the STEM women, because this is, I guess, my passion is around helping the STEM women to get into the leadership level of the industry. You would probably find that there will be less likelihood of large-scale disasters like the tailings dams failures in Brazil, or large-scale social mistakes like Juukan Gorge, if we had more diversity in the leadership level that are connected to community, that have very strong values around social justice and sustainability. People who are used to being held to very high professional standards because it's not safe to fail. STEM women in the mining industry are held to very, very high standards throughout their careers. You want to keep them in the industry, to keep those high standards right through to leadership and the decision-making processes that mining companies follow through when they're making their calls on big ticket items that could lead to massively destructive events that could be an existential threat to their company's bottom line. So having more STEM women in the leadership of mining companies will protect the company as much as add value.
Yeah, that's very true. And I have heard that and read about that before. You're definitely not the first person to say that having more females on the management team will bring a broader range of views and diverse views, which obviously helps make better decisions. So that's really, that's a really good point. And I guess just to wrap up, do you think it will be another 2030 by the time all this disaggregated data is available, or how long do you foresee it taking before the level of data that you want to see? How long do you think that's going to take? Will it be 10 years, 15 years? I mean,
less. I would imagine that within 5 years, because of the digital transformation of mining, so many companies working hard on improving their one source of truth digital backbone of the company, it should be a lot easier to report disaggregated granular data.
Okay, interesting. All right, Barbara and Alex, thank you for joining us today, and we will leave it there, and hopefully we will take up this conversation soon. Thank you.